On behalf of the John Marshall Law School and our center, I'd very much like to welcome you here tonight to our presentation, Adventures of Women in Cyberspace with Aliza Sherman. Tonight's presentation is part of our ongoing author series that's designed to inform, educate, and hopefully demystify issues and problems that stem from technological developments, issues that affect every one of us. As many of you know, our center offers degree programs in information technology and privacy to both lawyers and non-lawyers. We have continuing legal education programs, extracurricular programs like the Journal of Computer and Information Law, our international moot court competition, academic conferences, and community or public service kinds of programs like tonight's presentation. And we're particularly excited about the timing of this event tonight. We at the law school have just recently celebrated the 100th anniversary of our first woman graduate. That was Jessie E. Cook. And when the John Marshall Law School was founded in 1899, it was one of only a few institutions in the country admitting women to law school programs. And that's because the founders of this law school believed that admission should not be denied because of race, gender, religious affiliation, or ethnicity. And today we're very proud of the fact that the John Marshall Law School enrollment is essentially 50-50, 50% women here. We're currently establishing the Women's Resource Fund. It's a scholarship program and a lot more to assist current students and alumni. And in addition to the work that we do within the law school, as some of you may know, March is Women's History Month. And the theme for this year is Women Inspiring Hope and Possibilities. And tonight's speaker has done just that, inspiring women to become technologically literate, achieve success in the cyber world, and to tell you a little bit more about our guest tonight is Associate Dean John Corkery. Thank you. Enjoy the program tonight.
We're very glad to have you with us tonight at Adventures of Women in Cyberspace, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Our speaker is Aliza Sherman. She's been named by Newsweek as one of the top 50 people who matter most on the internet. Aliza Sherman is a web pioneer, an online marketing expert, and author of several well-known books, and a regular contributor to national magazines and websites. Ms. Sherman is the original Cybergrrl, known worldwide as an internet pioneer. She's credited with paving the way for women on the web. She started the first woman-owned full-service internet company in the world, Cybergrrl Inc., and the first global internet organization for women, Web Girls International. Her recent books include Power Tools for Women in Business, 10 Ways to Succeed in Life and Work, Cybergrrl at Work, Tips and Inspiration for the Professional You, and Cybergrrl, A Woman's Guide to the World Wide Web. Just in from the cowboy state of Wyoming, please welcome Aliza Sherman.
Okay. Yes, I was just asked, is it the cowboy state or the equality state? I said, well, they claim to be both, but let's just say it's the cowboy state. I probably will start this off in a strange way with a poem. It's only 4 lines though, so don't hold your breath. Do you express yourself or leave things unsaid? Do you say what you feel or hide behind fear? Do you make yourself heard or whisper instead? Do you say it out loud or hope they can't hear? Your voice is your power. Set it free. The internet gave me my voice. The internet gave me my power. How can machines, how can data lines, how can bits and bytes do that? Well, to me, the internet became my connection to the world. I'm going to present you with my story. And some of you who are totally wired and have been for as long as you can remember will have to imagine a time when there wasn't the internet for all of us. But a lot of you who are my contemporaries and beyond will clearly remember those days, just like we remember the days before fax machines, before cell phones were being carried around and used on the street and at the dinner table. So this is taking you back to a different time not so long ago. The irony of this is we're just talking about the late 1980s and the 1990s. But in a sense, because of technology, it's now ancient history. I was afraid of computers. I had heard about them. This is the 1980s. I was a secretary. I used typewriters. I was told that if I learned computer skills, I could make a few dollars more an hour. My fear was if I touched a computer, it would zap my energy. It would zap my creativity. It was a foreign object with so much power. Now, I did have a very vivid imagination. I grew up reading science fiction novels while all my girlfriends were reading romance novels. So I had already thought about these machines, and I was convinced that they could take control of me. So here I am, a secretary, being offered a few dollars more an hour if I learn computer skills. I finally opted for the money, and I touched my first computer. What I loved about it were two things. I could easily correct my mistakes, and I could type, and it could keep up with almost as fast as I could think. So to me, for a while, the computer was this tool that I could use to communicate in the sense of typing a letter. But there was a limitation there. It didn't turn out to be that big monster and energy sapper that I thought it was going to be. But then I bought my first computer. Now, the reason I bought my first computer was because I wanted to be a published writer. And I had been writing for many years in spiral notebooks, longhand. And I thought, well, if I type my manuscripts, I'll get published. I later learned that you also have to submit your writing before you get published, but that was just a technicality. Right now, in my mind, if I typed them up and printed them out and they looked good, I would become a published writer. So I bought my first computer. Now this may ring a bell to some of you, an Amstrad 1640. Yeah, Amstrad was sort of the IBM of the UK, and I got it real cheap in New York. It had dual floppies, virtually no hard drive, and you had to alternate the floppies. And we're not talking little floppy disks, we're talking the bigger floppy disks, and alternate them in order to run a program or in order to save something. Now, some of you are probably already thinking, oh, she must be so old. But this was true. This was an amazing computer. Now, the person who helped me buy this computer was a little bit of a, I guess the best way of saying is was a geek. And he suggested that I also buy a modem. Now, this is back in the day that the modem was not within the computer, but separate. So I looked at it and I said, well, what is that going to do for me? It was $200 more. So he explained that I'd be able to connect my computer to other computers. And I thought, okay, how is that going to help me? He said, trust me, you'll love it. I loved it. Now, this is 1987. I was connecting to literally other computers in people's basements or bedrooms or back rooms. You really had no idea who it was or what exactly you were connecting to until you got there. And it was all in text. So I was connecting to these computers. I knew I was on someone else's computer because there was information that I knew was not on my computer. And I'm reading information, and then I discovered games. I was playing Hangman. I was playing these games that I called word adventures. I don't know if any of you remember these. You're in a forest. If you go north, there's a castle. If you go south, you're on the beach. Go north. You've entered the castle. If you go east, and it just went on, and you went through this whole room that is completely described in words. But I was captivated. And I spent hours on the computer, to the point that my sister and my roommates sat me down one evening for an intervention because I was obsessed. They were worried about my social life because I would come home from work and I'd get on the computer and I would never leave the apartment. I was happy. I had found this incredible place and space. I didn't really have terms to describe it yet, but there was a there. I didn't know exactly where, but it was tangible to me, and I liked being there. One night, now I'm in New York City, mind you. I've just moved there from North Carolina, so we're talking about culture shock. I'm sitting in my New York City apartment in the evening. Everyone else is out having a social life. And I'm typing away, and suddenly this little box pops up, and it says, "Do you want to chat?" Well, I jump out of the chair, scream, run to the window, close the shades. I swear I knew someone was watching me. Then, as I went back to the computer, I saw another message. "Hello, are you there?" Then I was convinced my computer was talking to me. And it wasn't such a far-fetched idea because I had read William Gibson's Neuromancer. So I knew now that there were human beings in that computer, and the computer was alive. This is my first experience with realizing that while I was attached through that phone line to another computer, so was someone else. And he turned out to be a 17-year-old kid in Brooklyn. That was my first encounter in cyberspace. But it triggered something. It made me realize that this communications tool was far greater than anything I had ever dreamed of. And that I could not only type my writing and print it out, I could put it out there online. Now, I don't know if the 17-year-old kid from Brooklyn would have been interested in it, but there were other people out there. That was a moment of discovery. And today we take it for granted, but back then it was pure magic. Now, in 1990s, before 1995, they said that women made up 10% of the online population. There were about 10% of the cyberspace population was female. I couldn't find them. And I remember doing searches and trying to figure out where these women were. And then I read an article in a magazine about a service called Women's Wire, started by two women in San Francisco, Ellen Pack and Nancy Ryan, and they wanted to develop an online space for women. At the same time, I had just gotten an account with a very small service called America Online. And I say very small service because back then it was the underdog. Prodigy was the biggest thing, CompuServe was next, and America Online was this little startup that possibly could do something. Well, when I got to America Online, it was like a major city for me. It was sort of like coming to New York City all over again. There were a lot of people on there. But again, I couldn't figure out where other women were because everyone who wanted to chat with me was a guy wanting a date. I soon learned that this place, this space, was not so different from the streets of New York. There were dark alleyways. There were guys hitting on you. There were wolf whistles as you walked by. So I learned that because there was this anonymity, that I didn't have to announce the fact that I was female. That I could create a screen name that disguised my identity, or that advertised a portion of my identity. And I chose on America Online, I chose the screen name NYC Writer because I was located in New York City and I figured, well, that's anonymous enough because so are other millions and millions of people. And because I was an aspiring writer. As soon as I changed my name from Aliza S., which screamed, I'm a female, I don't know what I'm doing online, hit on me, please, to NYC Writer, the dynamic changed. I was not hit on again. Instead, people said, oh, you're from New York City. I've always wanted to go there. Or, oh, you're from New York City. I've got family there. Instantly, my self-identification, my ID, changed my entire experience. Eventually, somebody said, oh, you're a writer. Thank goodness. What do you write? And I explained that I was working on a book about domestic violence geared toward teenagers. And they said, well, you really should meet Eva S. Turns out Eva S. was a woman who was holding a weekly chat session on women's issues on America Online. But it was such a big city, I never would have bumped into her if it wasn't for that moment that someone connected us. So I got in touch with Eva S. and we became cyber pals. We emailed, and eventually she had me as a guest on her chat show because essentially she was the Oprah of the internet. She was the first talk show host with a regular talk show online. I soon learned more about Eva. We decided to actually meet. And Eva was housebound. She had chronic fatigue syndrome, and it had been so debilitating. She was bedridden for several years. Her son bought her a computer and a modem, and that became her only connection to the world. Eventually, she could get out of bed, but she really couldn't leave her home. And yet she was the Oprah of the internet. She had activity, livelihood, and connection because of the internet. That was my first experience with another woman whose life had been touched and transformed by the internet. Now, back to Woman's Wire. I had joined America Online and was sort of a Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore kind of girl. I joined Women's Wire at the same time. It was more expensive and it was much smaller. At its peak, there were 1,100 women subscribed. This was also in the format of an old-fashioned bulletin board system where America Online started to get fancier, lots of graphics, lots of colors, bells and whistles. So it was a little primitive, but it was a lot better than the early services I was using that were only text-based. In fact, I had initially tried a service called Echo, East Coast Hangout, which was the East Coast equivalent of The Well, which was the Bay Area chat space and community online. I had tried Echo, and those text commands were driving me insane. And I finally quit. And when I did cancel my account, I got a personal phone call from the founder of Echo, Stacy Horn, who said, please don't quit. We need more women in our space. I said, I can't stand the text commands. I need graphics. I'm going to AOL. And she spent a considerable amount of time trying to convince me to stay because she knew the value of having women in that space and she wanted it to be women friendly. But truth be told, I wanted the graphics. And so I left. On Women's Wire, they had primitive graphics. But it was interesting because I had never been in a virtual space where there were only women and where women talked about things that women talk about. And we didn't worry about getting hit on by anyone. It was a fascinating, different kind of place. I began to build forums in this space. And this began to show me the power of building and creating and being a part of actually making a community happen online. When have we ever in our lives had the opportunity to literally brick by virtual brick build up a community, create content for that community? And then I learned an ugly story. This was my first exposure to women in business against other women in business. This company was about to get some financial investment. A woman had brought in some venture capitalists to bring Women's Wire to the next level. But her stipulation was that she be made president if this money comes through. The money came through. The two founding partners, one of them, Ellen, the businesswoman, remained in command, second in command. Nancy, the community builder, was fired. We were devastated. We had built this together. Nancy was our leader, and she was let go because there was no room for that many leaders at the top in their eyes. And I did the unthinkable. I destroyed my forums. This was my first experience with anarchy. And I was the anarchist. But to me, I was making a statement that what was done in business was wrong. Therefore, I didn't want anyone to profit off my work if they were going to have those kinds of ethics. Now, of course, they could have sued me because in a sense, they owned all of that content. Thank goodness they didn't. And I felt I made my statement. But it was a very scary foreboding of the kinds of things that were about to happen to our community. This was our community. This was about connecting. This was about information. This was about making contact. This was about networking. This was about sharing. And suddenly it wasn't. Now remember, this was also the internet. This was not the World Wide Web. The web had just been invented and just began to get out into the general public. A little bit. But this was not even the web. I had heard inklings about the web because remember, I'm kind of geeky anyway. But I didn't know what it was. One night, while I was working late on the computer, I decided to go out for a bite to eat with a friend. In New York City, you can do this. I don't know if you can do it in Chicago, 1 o'clock in the morning, go out to a diner. Don't know. They can do it there. We were held up at gunpoint and kidnapped. Kidnapped is what they were indicted on later. At the time, it just meant at gunpoint, we were taken against our will from in front of my friend's apartment, down the block, around the corner, to the bank. And they tried to force us to pull money out. It was about a 15-minute ordeal, and we managed to escape. I'll fill you in a little because people always ask afterwards, what happened? Tell me what happened. There were 3 guys. They all had guns. My friend and I, my friend was a male. I just knew he was going to be macho and just ruin everything, and we would both be laying dead on the ground. But luckily, he restrained his testosterone and was quiet. Meanwhile, I was chattering up a storm, and I told them, my friend doesn't have any money. I have money, but it's back at his apartment, but we're locked out. So if you come back to the apartment and help us break in, I'll give you all my money and my check card and my credit cards. And they were like, why would you do that? I said, because I hate New York. I'm getting ready to move anyway. And they believed me. And we left the ATM vestibule and began walking down the street. They had tucked their guns in as we were walking down the street again. And then suddenly some people appeared behind us. I began slowing down. They were paying attention to something else, and my friend said, run. I didn't move. All I could think was, they're going to shoot me in the back. My friend again said, run. I turned around, ran around the corner, down the block. He was running after me, and they were not chasing us. We did catch them about a week later, found one of them on the street, called the cops. He turned in his friends, good friend. We identified them. We went to trial about 6 to 8 months later and convicted them all. Now, I tell this sort of in the midst of my cyberspace story, sort of that real world awakening, that moment, because what it did for me was completely shift the way I looked at my life. After you stare down the barrel of a 9mm gun, things change. Your perspective changes. And what it did for me was make me realize I had to do something different with my life. The internet had always been my hobby. I called it my secret closeted little hobby. Sort of afraid to tell anyone about it because they might think I was weird. But now I realized I wanted to do something with the internet. I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico to regroup, which is a good place to go to regroup, and saw an ad in the newspaper that said, discover the World Wide Web. And I called up and said, what is the World Wide Web? I thought I knew what it was, but it had something to do with the internet, but wasn't sure. And the guy said, come take a class, $10, 1 hour. You'll learn HTML. $10 later, I was an internet expert and a web designer at that. I literally took that 1 hour class and the skills I learned, returned to New York City, and decided to start a company around the web. Big problem. I knew nothing about business, but I knew a heck of a lot about the internet. And I was an expert HTMLer because in 1 hour at that time, you could learn everything there was to know about HTML. But I was convinced I could start a business. I even came up with a really cool name. I was going to be Cybergrrl. Cyber for cyberspace from William Gibson's Neuromancer, and GRRL because GIRL sounded too young. And GRRL was cool. Now, I'm a woman in cyberspace about to become a woman in new media, which was sort of the term that they were starting to use for this new industry. I was afraid to call myself Cybergrrl. I was afraid they wouldn't take me seriously. So when I first went out there, I was CG Internet Media. CG for Cybergrrl, of course. And I would pound the pavement. I didn't have enough money to afford a laptop, so I would have my friend carry the entire CPU and monitor for me into every meeting that I would go to. And I met with the Lincoln Center. I met with the Museum of Modern Art. And when he would lug this huge computer in, and I would set it up and begin my presentation. And I will remember To this day, that meeting with the MoMA, after I did this presentation, and I stopped and I said, are there any questions? And they turned to my friend, the guy who was sitting in the corner who knew nothing about computers, and began addressing him. So this is what it was going to be like being a woman in new media? It wasn't that much different from being a woman in the music business or being a woman running a nonprofit organization or all the other things I had done. I thought it was going to be different. I would call up and ask people if they would like a website, and they said, send your resume. I said, no, I'm not looking for a job. I'm president of my own company. And they would still ask for my resume. I said, all right, something here has got to change. I learned that you write a bio when you're the president. You don't have a resume anymore. I learned that I knew more than any of the men in the room at that time about the internet, and I had to make it known. I learned that I could call myself Cybergrrl. There was power in that. It was memorable. It was different. And it was me. And I began to call my company Cybergrrl Inc. I needed to take that power. I needed to take charge of that and not let anyone tell me, you're just a chick. You're just a girl. No. I'm a girl. Big difference. That was a great name, Cybergrrl. So of course, what domain name did I reserve? Cybergrrl.com. Now this is back when the internet managed domain names and only one domain name was allowed per person. Now I had a hacker friend who told me that it's one domain name per email address. So I set up a few more email addresses and got a few more domain names. But it never occurred to me to get the regular spelling of Cybergrrl because, that wasn't my name. Within a year, somebody else got that name. A porn site. This was my very first encounter with cyber law. But at the time, it was really just called trademark law. I had been working to establish my trademark. I was following all the rules. And now a porn site had my name, essentially my name. Because when you say Cybergrrl, nobody's going to spell it G-R-R-L. They're going to go to the porn site, which was hurting my business. We did everything right. We went after a company called Gilda Marks, a fitness company that had a Cybergrrl t-shirt. We got them to cease and desist. We went after a multi-million-dollar video company that had just held the name Cybergrrl for possibly using it in a future date. We got them to cease and desist. But we couldn't get the porn site to stop. Because who makes the most money on the internet? Porn. And where are they located? Nobody knows. So that was the bane of our existence for the 5 years I ran the company, was that I was not savvy enough, smart enough, quick enough, what's the word, for taking the other spelling. It never occurred to me that someone else would take it, much less a site with naked chicks, which explained to me why suddenly, that end of that year, I started getting emails. Where are the naked chicks? And I'd say, naked chicks, you must have the wrong site, but take a look around. You might enjoy what you read. And then I would get these emails back that would say, my girlfriend would really love this site. I'll let her know about it. And of course, I thought to myself, and I promised not to tell her how you found it. I wanted to meet other women in this industry. And back then, there really weren't a lot of women running their own internet companies. But I wanted to meet women with websites. To me, if they had a website, that was half the battle. So I started to look at websites and do searches on Yahoo for women. Everything was X-rated. Girls, everything was X-rated. But eventually, going from one site to the next, I finally found this little pocket of women. Some of them were Echo members who had gone to the web and created their site, or Well members who went to the web and created sites. And I started to email them and link to their sites and ask them to link to my site. And this whole community began to form just through linked sites. But I wanted to meet them. So I set up a meeting. I said, we're going to have a meeting, and you're all web girls. I'm Cybergrrl, you're all web girls, and we're going to meet at a cyber cafe in downtown New York City. I set the date, the time, and I went to the cyber cafe that morning, and I waited by the door, and it suddenly occurred to me, they might not be women. Because of the anonymity on the internet, I had already learned that men really enjoyed acting like women online, pretending to be women. So there was a very good chance that these dozens of women I was emailing with were not in fact female. So I sat and I waited, and then I'd see one woman come into the cyber cafe, and I'd say, are you a web girl? And she'd look at me really strange. I thought, okay. The next woman, are you a web girl? And she'd look at me really strange again. I thought, okay, this is not working out. Then I saw a woman walk in with platinum blonde hair, a hot pink stripe, pink pumps, a pink tutu dress. And I looked at her and I said, oh my God, that's a web girl. And she was. About 6 women showed up. Different ages, different backgrounds, different interests, but we all had websites, and that was our connection. We had found each other online. We began to connect in the real world. And I wrote about it. The next meeting, 15 women showed up. And I thought, well, how did you hear about it? They said, on the internet. Right. The next meeting, 30 women showed up. Then I started getting emails from women in other countries asking, can we start one of these web girls things too? And other states, New Zealand, Australia, Seattle, Austin, Texas. We were the first online and offline community for women, a hybrid, sort of the best of both worlds, and we were global. I got a lot of flack from men who wanted to join, and I said, but it's for women. Why do you want to join? And the best reason they could usually give me was, because you don't want me to, because you won't let me. And eventually I gave in and I allowed them to attend a meeting, and they were the only man in the room, and they were scared to death. They had never been in a room full of women. Women who were vocal, women who were strong and intelligent, who knew about technology. It scared the living daylights out of them, and they never returned. In 1998, women made up over 30% of the cyberspace population. A couple of years before that, 1 year, less than 1 year from that first Web Girls meeting, I remember meeting in the office of this brand new company called iVillage, and sat down to look at my notes and looked up finally to address the Web Girls, and there were 200 women in the room. So I knew they were there, and I had learned how to find them. Now, 1998, the landscape was changing. There were more companies doing what we did. We did website design, and we built our own websites. So we did publishing, community building online. But now there were a lot of companies doing this. And the big difference between them and us, they charged a lot of money. I think it's kind of a female thing. You don't know what you're worth, you don't know how to price yourself, and you always underrate what you can do. So while other companies wouldn't even talk to you unless you were ready to plunk down $100,000 or more for a website, we can barely, with a straight face, ask for $20,000. So very quickly, we stayed small as these other companies grew. Venture capital. Around 1998, about 7% of all venture capital, 7% went to female-owned companies. Only 7% of that money, of all of that money. We were offered $1 million. Not to buy the company, just to buy a portion of the company. We had to then come up with the value of our company so we knew what percentage of the company we were giving up. And my business partner said, let's take less. We want to own more. So yes, we turned down $1 million. And we only took $300,000 because we wanted control. Kiss of death. If somebody offers you $1 million, you take it. You ask for more. We thought that we would be great because we were in control. Meanwhile, the Yahoo guys gave up almost all of their company and kept a tiny sliver. But we all know how that ended up. Owning a small piece of a billion-dollar company versus a large piece of a $2 million company. And that's as far as it went. The internet gave me my voice. And one of the wonderful things that came out of it was being able to write some books and actually get published. In fact, the Wall Street Journal wrote about our company, and 5 publishers called me and asked if I'd write a book for them. They didn't even care if I knew how to write. They just saw an opportunity and they offered me a book deal. They were all the publishing companies that had turned down a book proposal that I had an agent shop around. So I was able to pick and choose, and I picked Valentine and went with them, and I had a book on the shelf, a real tangible book. You know those things that they said would disappear because of the internet? Hasn't happened yet. Still can't enjoy reading on a screen, and I can't bring it into the bathtub either. So I've got that real tangible book. This was my dream. When I was offered the chance to write a second book, I decided to leave the company. I had done all I could do. I knew several things about myself. I knew I was a terrible manager. I mean, I was the kind of manager who, if somebody came up to ask me a question and I was on the computer, I would bite their heads off. And then I came up with this crazy idea that if I'm wearing a hat, that means my door is closed. Because, of course, we worked in the open space. If I'm wearing a hat, my door is closed, so you don't speak to me. And I wore that hat the whole time. So I knew I did not like managing. I knew that I did not like negotiating. It was a great run. It was an interesting trip. But I really wanted to be a writer. So I left the company to write the second book. But you know, once you're in the internet, you itch for more. Once you have a company, you kind of want another. And I got the wild idea to start another internet company. It was going to be a bilingual site for Latinas, a marketplace and resources for the Latina professional. It was a great idea. What was interesting is as we began to go look for venture capital, here I was, the woman who didn't want to be talking about money, suddenly talking about money again. The first time round, people would ask, but are women even online? Venture capitalists would say, but my wife doesn't like women-only sites, so I'm sure they're not going to work. This time, the question was, but are Hispanics online? And also, my wife doesn't like websites, so would a bilingual website for women work? Things hadn't really changed. What's interesting is that I actually thought that they would. I actually thought because of this technology, because of this transformation in communication, that it would truly make an impact and fundamentally change business, fundamentally change venture capital, fundamentally change all the things that were still being run by the same people, the same men. Because they came from their major corporations, moved into this internet space, and made it the same as the other media. It really hadn't changed. I'll give a couple of quick venture capital anecdotes. From a woman's point of view, men in the audience, if you've got a weak stomach, hold on. All right, this is what it's like to be a woman going for venture capital. I'm running late because I couldn't figure out what to wear. I go outside to hail a cab. There is no cab to be found. I finally find a cab. I'm sweating. I'm crying. I have the wrong address. I call up my business partner, a woman. What's the address? Get the address. Okay, we're on our way. I start my period. I don't have tampons. I am on my way to the home of a very, very wealthy man who has the potential to kickstart this company. And I am sobbing now in the cab. And I call up my business partner again, crying. This is a possibly multi-million-dollar deal, and all I need is a tampon. She meets me at the cab on the street, hands me a tissue, hands me a tampon, ushers me into the house, sneaks me into the bathroom so I can do my female thing. Splash water on my face, compose myself, and then go in to talk about big money. This was the guy who said, my wife doesn't like websites for women, so I don't think it's going to fly. And are Hispanics really online? The next experience. One of the larger Hispanic websites. I'm not going to mention their name, que pasa. But here we were, flying to Arizona to meet with them, to talk about a partnership to create bilingual content for women on their site. They had just hired Gloria Estefan to be their spokesperson. So we thought, wow, woman-friendly. All right, it's crazy to be a woman going into the internet industry, but it's even crazier to be a woman going into the Latino internet industry because they are macho. But we were ready. We were ready for them. We're negotiating, we're going back and forth, and finally the president of the company says, look, you're just two women with a business plan. We're a multi-million-dollar company. I couldn't say a word, but luckily my business partner said, we may be just two women with a business plan right now, but we have more internet experience than all of you in this room combined. And we know what women online want. We've had success before, and we'll have it again with or without you. Hallelujah. Then they did the power play, the male power play. Everyone gets up and leaves the room except for the president and his lawyer. Woo! Meant to intimidate. So we did the female power play. We excused ourselves to the ladies' room and we went together. Nothing gets a man more than wondering what the heck they're doing in there and what they're talking about. But we came back out We held firm on what we wanted, and we got it. Within 6 months, they went out of business. Things had changed. We were able to land $250,000 from an angel investor, from a woman, and then the market crashed. So what did we do? Run off to Tahiti? No. We returned the money. We returned the money rather than spending it and ruining the relationship. Because we were women in cyberspace. We were women in new media. And to us, the relationship was everything. So we had no company. We had no money. But I walked away from all of that with something incredibly valuable that I have never lost. My voice. The internet gave me my voice. The internet gave me my power. It was a platform, and it still is. I'm blogging. I got a blog. The blog is truly bringing us back to those beautiful moments when the internet was all about communication and expression and connection. The internet does give us that. Despite the commercialism, despite the invasion, the internet still gives us that. I mean, there is a woman sitting in this room today who I have never met face to face until tonight, and we only knew each other through email. That's an amazing and powerful thing. And remembering that, no matter what happens in cyberspace, that those are the most powerful things that it offers us, and those are the ways that we should be using it to connect, to communicate, to build community, to organize, to inform. That is the spirit of the internet. Not just a woman's vision. It really should be all of ours. So what does a woman in cyberspace look like today? It's me. It's all of us. It's just being connected. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. And I'm happy to answer some questions. I usually offer a copy of my book to the first person who asks a question. Because you have to bribe people, because it's not like cyberspace, it's not anonymous. You have to stand up and you have to speak in front of people. I know, it's hard. It's tough. Yes?
What direction do you see yourself going in at this point in terms of your activities?
Yeah, what direction do I see myself going in now in terms of cyberspace? Well, this blogging thing is really amazing. I'm really enjoying it. It harkens back to the day where you just put yourself out there and people connected with you. But a couple of things. I'm a woman with many websites. What can I say? I'm also a woman with many more domain names. Any domain name I can figure out that I think I can do something with somewhere in the future, if it's available, I buy it. So I probably have about 22, 25 domain names. Several different things I'm working on right now. One is a blog. Again, this is a female thing. Guys, you can plug yours if you don't want to hear it. Pregnancy and miscarriage blog, which I think is really important. And it's turning into the start of a book. So my next book will be about the first trimester of pregnancy. And I'm using the internet, again, like I have in all of my books, to solicit stories from women about their first 3 months of pregnancy and about miscarriage. So last time, I probably heard from about 250 women and included 75 in my last book. So I use it as a tool to gather information for my books. I also have already done all the research, including received all the stories for a travel book I've been working on. So I'm using it in that hybrid sense. I use the internet to gather stories and to put information out there for offline projects that I'm working on. So then, of course, I've got my dog's website that I continuously maintain, and every so often somebody buys a dog book off the dog website, and I get some money from Amazon. Who knew? But mostly what I look to do is a combination of writing books, writing for magazines, and somehow using the internet as my tool to find people to interview or to put the word out there about my projects. So I think that's probably how I'm going to continue to use it. Yes?
I hate to be 2 minutes in a row asking questions. One of the
I think it's great.
I've been dealing with a number of people who love the idea of connectedness you're talking about, and love to see it move forward. But there's always this problem of the huge amount of chaff. You know, you may write great blogs, but not everybody who does blogging writes great blogs.
True.
And in fact, you're performing an editorial process because
Yes.
you're getting lots of stories and then publishing some. And the question is, how do you deal with that dichotomy where people don't want stuff to be mediated by editors, but at the same time, you want to read quality stuff?
Well, I think for those of you who want to read quality stuff, have to endure some kind of filter, some kind of editing process. I mean, even when we first started using Yahoo, in a sense, that was that filter to hopefully something a little more relevant, a little more quality. So because of the nature of the internet and the fact that anything and everything can absolutely happen, those who want to be more discerning really have to endure some level of filter or editing. Then those people like me who seem to have way too much time on my hands, I end up being one of those types of filters. And that's a service that I enjoy providing because I'm the one who spends the hours and hours online sifting through that which is quality and that which is not. But you know, it's so subjective too, because my concept of quality could be somebody else's concept of trash. So then you have to know me as an editor or know me as that filter and trust me and rely on my opinion. So because of the dynamics and nature of the internet, you either have to take that geyser for what it is and see how much you can choke down, or find your filters. Your filter can be a search engine. Your filter could be a human being or a series of websites that do that filtering process for you. But it's true. I mean, I've been going through and I've been searching for pregnancy blogs and miscarriage blogs, and some of them make me terrified that mine is as boring as theirs. I read it and I think, oh my God, nobody go to my blog, please. I'm probably just incredibly boring. But right now, I'm in the process of just telling my own experience. But for some people, that is fascinating. For others, it's dribble. So it is a tough process, but that because of the nature of the internet, you can have it unfiltered. You can have it pure. But if you don't have the time, you find your filters. You find the ones that work for you. Any other questions? Yes?
Would you like to make any comments on the internet and politics? And I'm thinking Howard Dean built this great online group of supporters, but wasn't able to translate into votes in the primaries.
Yeah, I think it depends on your topic. Sometimes the internet translates incredibly well online, offline, back and forth. And other times, it's not really a reflection of what people will actually do in their real lives. And that is the weirdest thing of all, because on the one hand, I'm saying to you, you know, cyberspace wasn't any different than the real world. But there are these moments, these incredible pockets where something really happens online that you just do not see offline. And you hope to bring that momentum back in to that real world, and it doesn't translate. So politics, I think, is a very good example of that. Activism is also, in a sense, a good example of that, because sometimes some activist movements can have incredible momentum online, incredible numbers, phenomenal numbers. Then you ask them to show up somewhere, and nobody's there. So I don't think there's always a rhyme or reason, but there are certain topics and certain issues and certain areas where it doesn't translate back and forth. And in some cases, that may change. I was just speaking today to the chairwoman of the Family Violence Prevention Fund and another board member, and we were talking about the issue of domestic violence awareness, and can the internet really be used as a tool for domestic violence awareness and for activism and for fundraising? And I say yes and no. Will you be able to organize people to then go physically meet someplace? I don't think that's going to work. But will you be able to disseminate information that is valuable and get people involved in issues and get people to email their senators or email their representatives? Yes, I think that could work. But there is no one way or another in that. And I think politics especially is a very interesting terrain when it comes to the internet. Anyone else? Yeah.
How do you see online publications impacting advertising and distribution of offline publications? In particular, when one publishing company owns both channels, and how do you see it impacting that?
We all thought when we could publish online and advertisers were paying attention to the fact that we were publishing online and we could sell ads, we all thought we were transforming publishing as we knew it. All we were doing was just trying to take traditional models and bring it back online. All we were doing was just following the exact same thing that was following in the real world. And then there was the argument that it was going to substitute, it was going to change everything. No one would read magazines anymore. No one would read books anymore. And it's just not true. So I think there's going to be different degrees in terms of in publishing. I mean, there are people who are incredibly successful right now. Woman Motorist, which has it's an e-newsletter about automotive care geared toward women. Gosh, a couple years ago they had over 100,000 subscribers, and that was just an e-newsletter, and they were getting advertisers, and they're still running, they're still successful. They never would have succeeded as a print magazine. In fact, they saw a competitor who did a print magazine on that topic fail. So in some circles, in some areas, it's incredibly successful. They are still doing really well. And this is email newsletter too, not a web-based publication, which is really quite interesting, text only. But it's not going to replace it. We know what happened. All the advertisers pulled the money out of the internet. Even though the most brilliant thing about the internet and advertising was you could measure. Television, you can't measure. Radio, you can't measure. You don't know if they really heard that jingle and then hopped in their car and went to McDonald's because they heard it on the radio. You don't know that. But on the internet, you knew. You knew when they clicked on the ad. You knew if they ordered right then and there. I mean, that was like magic. But then people stopped clicking on the banners. People stopped clicking. Nobody's figured it out. Take that back. Some people have figured it out just for what they do, and it works for them. And I love the fact that you have the opportunity to do that. Any of us in this room have the opportunity to give that a try. One person might not be satisfied because they're not making $1 million, and another person's thrilled because they're making $5,000 to $10,000 a month. It's all relative, but the power and the ability to do it is there. I don't know what's going to happen. God, I'd be a millionaire if I did. Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.